Yeah, I can. I have to just share this link. You have to take the answer. Which one? It's good. Hindi I got that not suggest. Hindi I got that. Okay. Okay. I mean, like, musically, जब हम नहीं बोलते तो लेकिन like I Hello, check.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Center for Grower-Centric Eco-Value Mechanisms, CGIM, and our partners, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Bharat Carbon Conclave 2026. Over the next 2 days, we will explore how India can build credible, inclusive, and high integrity carbon markets rooted in communities, science, and transparency. Day 1 focuses on the blueprint, the idea, policies, and innovations shaping India's carbon ecosystem. Let us begin. To formally welcome us, I invite Mr. Naveen Patidar, CEO of Aga Khan Rural Support Program, India, who has been leading initiatives on rural resilience and sustainable agriculture. Mr. Patidar, may I request you to kindly deliver the welcome address?
Morning, Namaskar. Uh, I thank everyone to join this small but very important conclave, and which is happening at a very appropriate time when whole world is talking about this new currency called carbon. How we play uh, a constructive role so that our communities, our farmers, they benefit from this emerging opportunity. I welcome everyone to this conclave. We have good fortune that Sunita Narayan ma'am also joined us, and I thank her for giving time to us for this important topic. I want to start with the very anecdotal experience. Almost 5 6 years back, we we as well as other civil society organizations, we suddenly started getting some calls that whether you work with farmers on region practices, can you share the list of farmers? Then we asked, why you require a list of farmers? What will do with those farmers? They said, no, we will create carbon projects. Money will come and we'll share. Bring in communities at the center of all these carbon discussions. That was the whole purpose with which we started. Then we quickly realized that it can be very dangerous for civil society organizations to partner with the carbon project developers without actually understanding the whole sector, understanding what can be plus and minus of this kind of arrangements, where are the communities in the whole arrangement. So that is how we started. The This particular conference is not about carbon markets, but rather it is about how carbon markets can benefit communities. This is the, I think, core of what we are going to discuss in next couple of days. That whether carbon markets are in reality, can they benefit smallholder farmers, communities living in remote areas, the forest communities. Those kind of discussions will happen over the next couple. And, if communities are provided enough incentives, they are involved, they are taken into confidence, not just through a very peripheral way of taking consent, but in the language, in the discussions which actually community understands, which they can contribute through. That kind of deeper engagement is required. Then only communities can come at the forefront of all these discussions. At least on the paper, it looks very promising that at one end, if the practices like regenerative agriculture, plantations, water conservations, these kind of initiatives actually benefit environment. On top of that, if the communities or the farmers can get some incentive, for adopting these practices, continuing these practices for longer period of time, if they get some financial incentives and any other incentive, then what is better than that? Mm. All other projects like CSR projects, they are very short term, 2 years, 3 years projects, while carbon projects are long term. So if farmers are given benefits for such a long period of time, 20 years, 30 years, and if they can sustain the practices on ground, which can benefit both farmers as well as you know, the environment, then I mean there is nothing better arrangement or partnership than that. Given that we work on the shortcomings which are there in the whole systems, most of these shortcomings are actually coming because of trust and transparency issues. Because those who are creating carbon on the ground, whether they really understand, whether they uh, know the language, whether they are actually contribute to project development, that is leading to a lot of trust gaps. And we found that one of the ways to overcome this trust gap is working with civil society organizations who are actually directly dealing with the communities on the ground. Communities trust them, CSOs trust communities, and that can be one of the very powerful tool to bridge the trust gap between the market and the communities. Transparency is another issue, that who are the project developers who are generating carbon credits, who are buying carbon credits, at what rate they are buying it, what proportion of these carbon credits are actually flowing to which actors in the whole value chain. That is another a very important topic which we would like to touch upon today and tomorrow. The idea of forming CGM itself is that the large proportion of uh, carbon credits, whether it can flow to communities directly, so whether 70%, 80%, even 90% in the larger projects, can it go to communities and their institutions? That is that can lead to lot of improvement in the transparency related questions which are being asked by many actors. We have to also look at legal frameworks, whether these legal frameworks can be made much more easier to understand for all the actors. India is still at the initial stage, so it is good time and a very opportune time that the rules and laws are formed in favor of local actors, communities, farmers, rather than we send a lot of our resources to external agencies. So this is all we are going to discuss. I would take a couple of more minutes that in last 3-4 years since CGM, the Center for Growth Centric Eco-Value Mechanisms, name is very complicated just because there were no other simple names available for registration. So, so we had to settle it this very complicated name. But in a very small team of 5-6 people, they have done amazing work of on 3-4 topics. First one is just generating awareness on what carbon markets are. So they worked with large numbers of civil society actors across almost maybe 18-20 states in the country. They worked with large numbers of farmers collectives to touch upon these topics. They demystified, simplified the terminologies, processes so that civil society organizations, their CRPs, farmer leaders can understand the whole thing. So that was one big thing this team has done. Second is they have developed quite a few knowledge resources. So we have done resources around training communities. There are resources around there is a good course for CRPs which is called carbon practitioners, which has been developed. So many such resources have been brought in. One interesting thing has been developed and which will be released during these will be principles. So what are the principles of community centric carbon markets? So it is another very interesting and exciting idea. This one of, I think, its kind of exercise which has been undertaken in the country. So this kind of work has been done, principles, knowledge resources, training materials, training of farmers collectives, CSOs, CRPs. So overall, I think we are at very uh, right time to discuss this important topic. If we start in the right direction, I think India will benefit out of this whole discussions. Otherwise, we have seen that many African countries, we have seen large exploitation also, and we do not want to go into that kind of direction. We want to see that there is enough equitable and justified benefits for all actors in the system, whether they are uh, carbon credit buyers or project developers or consultancy firms or farmers collectives or farmers. So overall, I think this sector will go forward if we keep the discussions of the communities. As it is said that no, nature has everything for the basic necessity of all of us, all the actors on the earth, but it cannot provide for the greed of every actor. So with that, I think carbon markets also has something for everyone if it is done in right manner, but it cannot serve the greeds of some of the actors and exploit others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Patida. To mark the formal opening of the conclave, we now invite our distinguished guest for the ceremonial lighting of the lamp, symbolizing knowledge and collective purpose. May I request esteemed guest, Mr. Naveen Patidar, CEO, AKRSPI, Ms. Sunita Narayan, Director General, Center for Science and Environment, Mr. Sameer Jain, CEO, Primus Partners, Mr. Shajesh Gupta, and Siddharth Dabi from CGIM to kindly come forward.
Thank you so much, everyone, for formally starting off this event. Um, Next is a special address by one of the most respected environmental voices in India, Ms. Sunita Narayan, Director General of the Center for Science and Environment, has played a pioneering role in shaping India's climate, sustainability, environmental policy discourse. She will speak on the integrity paradigm, designing resilient climate architectures for 2030. It is my honor to invite Ms. Narayan on stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for asking me. I'm really delighted to be here with all of you. Um, Naveen, thank you very much. Putting this together, I think it's really critical. Naveen forgot also to tell you that I'm on the AKRSP board. So I'm really happy to see this initiative because I do believe this is the way we need to. So why do I say that? Let's get a few facts together and let's be very clear of where we stand now. And then what is the objective that we have in common and how do we move ahead? Firstly, let's understand why climate change is real. We know that. So, nobody in this room, especially not in the field of carbon markets, can deny or must deny the fact that we are in this because of an imperative of a planetary crisis. So, you're not developing a market system because you're here to make money. You can make money. I have no problems with making money, but you must understand what is this market for. And I think that's very critical for us to start off. And I'm saying things which are obvious to all of you. So forgive me for that, but I just want to state the obvious as I begin to say this is about climate change. Now, when we come to climate change, we know that India is worst affected. We know that we have almost one extreme weather event a day in this country. And who is worst affected are the very poorest in this country, whether it is the heat that we will see, where laborers are affected, or the farmers, the people who are at the vanguards. It is also very clear that we need to do a lot more to be able to mitigate uh, the greenhouse gas emissions. And what is also very clear, the world is failing to do so. So that is the second fact that we have to understand. And we have to understand the fact that finance is not flowing where it needs to flow. That today, climate change mitigation is an expensive option. So let's not make light of this. It is expensive, and which is why the rich world, the developed world, which should have taken steps to reduce emissions, has not done so at the scale needed. It is not because they don't want to, but because it is expensive. And which is why finance is critical for the transformation that we need in our part of the world. The opportunity is very clear, and that's the third point, that we have huge opportunity to be able to build a green economy which does not first pollute and then have to clean up. We haven't built all our cities yet. We haven't built all our transport systems yet. We have not yet built everything, the energy systems. We can do things differently. And more importantly, we can find a benefit in which we can reduce emissions and we can protect livelihoods of large numbers of people. There is a win-win here. So as I begin to say this, I don't want anyone in this room to believe that I am not in favor of carbon markets. But I'm old in this game. So you have to also forgive me when I tell you, don't slip and fall into the bad practices of the past. I was at the Berlin Mandate meeting in the 90s. We were very much involved in tracking what happened with the clean development mechanism, an idea which started off very well to say we will use the opportunity to finance transition in countries of the South, and the credits will flow to the countries of the North. Brilliant idea. It deteriorated into what we started calling the cheap development mechanism, and then slowly the corrupt development mechanism. And of course, it was the convoluted development mechanism. So, three issues that please keep in mind. Cheap, because you were looking for all the cheapest options possible. And in CDM, the cheapest options were CFC to HFCs. So, who made money? The big companies who were producing for CFCs made a new chemical which today is responsible for climate change, and they made tons of money on it. We at that time wrote an appeal to the government of India that this is a windfall, take a tax We are not against making money, but it should go at least to the government of India, because that is a windfall tax that should flow into the government and then be used to do all the good things that we want to do. Didn't happen. It was a corrupt development mechanism because you had this band of verifiers, auditors, developers, all the rest of it. They were completely the ones that were making money versus the money going to any communities. And of course, it was the convoluted development mechanism because the rules of it were so convoluted, including the calculation of the incremental additional costs, that frankly, nobody understood what they were getting into. And that's a rip-off. That's a chance for rip-off. The minute, for most of us who work and live in India, we know that when the rules are made so complicated, it is being designed deliberately to make sure that we don't understand and somebody makes money off it. हम इतना तो जान गए हैं अपनी life में. We don't need to be taught this lesson. So this is where we are today. Now we have a voluntary carbon market in place. I believe it's a great opportunity. I believe Article 6, which is the formal carbon market, is an even greater opportunity because the rules of the game will be laid down and you have large funds flowing as private investment coming in to be able to do good in our world and take credits so that there is a reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. It is a win-win. There is no doubt. Sorry, this is very. Can I get some? Is this? Can I just drink out of here, or there is a glass here? So, as my colleague Trishant, who's right here, um, and Down to Earth, the magazine that we work with, we decided to take a look at the carbon credit. And they were doing so was to just, that's our job. Our job is not to take sides. Our job is to understand what is happening. And what is happening with the carbon credit market when it comes, what is happening with the carbon credit market when it comes to biogas, what's happening with the market, agriculture, particularly wet and dry, what's happening with the renewable sector, what's happening with the overall market as it flows. I don't know how many of you saw the report, but we were not nice about it. And I was angry. And I have to tell you, I was really angry. The reason is, this is something I believe in. Okay, and I'm old enough to tell you that there's something I strongly believe climate change is real. And I don't need fraudsters in this market. Because at the end of the day, we have to be determined emissions. That's the solution towards. And if you're not reducing emissions and you're making money out of it and you're doing a fraud, you need to be called out. I know you don't like it, who stories we wrote about. I don't care. I'll be very frank with you, because we need to create something which is very different. And I believe we can create something which is very different to do good, to create livelihoods of the poorest and also reduce emissions. How much better can the world be? And that has to be the objective. So when Naveen told me and Siddharth told me that this is something that about it, this where no one in the carbon market is very close to being written off as a global scam. Last week in Kenya, biggest carbon market has been cancelled by the government. Now they have cancelled it for different reasons, but one of the key reasons also when it came to cook stoves. The other project in Kenya, which was recorded across the world, is a project where you were using grasslands and pasture land and improvement. And that has also come into trouble again because local communities are saying, we haven't benefited from this. So it is very clear to me that as everything that happens, which we must not allow, we as a community have to be together on this. We believe in this objective. We believe in the objective of doing a effective, transparent carbon market, which will benefit local communities, regenerate the land, provide energy to the poorest. And when we did our report, and if all of you remember, we called it something quite simple and quite accurate. We said discredited. There cannot be any more powerful one word, discredited. I was discredited because we looked at the Chula program and we found that the Chula program was overestimating the carbon credits, number one. And that, as an environmentalist, and I'm speaking as an environmentalist, I've spent 4 decades in this. I don't give you my very clear, data showed us very clearly that there was a gross overestimation. Number two, we learned that people didn't benefit name of the free chula. Okay? Some of them even paid for the thing is about the auditors, the verifiers, the project developers. And at the end of the day, the communities don't even know what's the final price. There is no transparency. Even we could not get our hands on the price that was finally benefiting developer and what happened in the different chain. The communities did not get anything. When we came to biogas projects, it was even worse because the biogas projects were actually funded by the state government, in this case of Madhya Pradesh. And the carbon credits which were taken were less than 10% of the capital cost of the carbon of the capital cost of building the project. So you were making the subsidy it was given by a poor government in a poor state of India. Completely wrong to build a market based on subsidy for the rich in the name of the poor. That cannot be the principle of any societal market. Now, when I posted that I was coming here, one very interesting comment I had on LinkedIn was, and maybe I'm dealing with Gen Z, Gen X, millenniums, I don't know. But from where I come from, societal values to societal values, they're about not cheating people. They're about benefiting communities. They're about making sure that the objective that you have set yourself to reduce emissions actually is being done. So I really, and I can go on, but I have no intentions of doing so. Our reports are in public domain. And I'm sure you database of all country where they are, and that I hope will be of use to all of you to see what's happening, what move towards. So what is the way ahead? I'm very clear this market as it is today work. I
Recording in progress.
where they needed to go. That apparent. When we wrote to one project developer, we were told that you should not go to these villages. We in India were told, and this is in Tamil Nadu, we were told, please don't go to those villages because it is Naxalite infested. And you should not go there. Another project developer wrote to us that we are in the period of silence. They actually sent us an email saying, we're in a period of silence. We cannot share anything with you. I would really urge all of us from the Indian side to put pressure on the registries to say, we need more transparent data. We are one fourth, Trishant, of the global voluntary carbon market today. I mean, if in BCCI we can use our heft to do all sorts of things, which I won't get into, surely we can use our heft as the one-fourth of the global carbon market, demand better rules of governance. I mean, we are always being taught rules of governance. Are transparent hona chahiye, credible hona chahiye, open hona chahiye. But आप मार्केट बना रहे हैं और आपने मार्केट ऐसी बनाई कि हमें कुछ पता ही नहीं चलता. Transparency is critical, but transparency will have to translate more than words. You need to make sure that we know where the project is, who the beneficiary is, what terms of the agreement with the beneficiary are, and what's the price. And it's the most difficult one because they will tell you the price is finally decided when the trading happens, and we don't know what the price is going to be. We finally got some estimation of the price by doing some broad averages. That's not the way to go. You need much more transparent systems. And you need transparencies to be drilled down into hard usage, not just words. This is going to be critical for this market. The second is we need to pay the real price of change. And that's where I find we as people from the South have to start demanding the methodologies that need to be made different so that we can get greater price paid for the price of labor, for the price of doing things. Right now, the market operates on filling on oversupply, cheap, and trading, and that's the end of it. We need to make sure that there is some sense of what is the price that needs to be paid. I mean, when we looked at renewable energy projects, they were paying 3 to 5% of the capital, the cost of land. You take the cost of the fact that people are growing trees rather than crops. What is the price they need to be paid? What will make afforestation viable with the top up of carbon markets? That's something we need to be able to ask, demand, and put floor to it. In fact, Rwanda came up with a proposal to put a floor to the carbon market, saying nothing below $30 per ton will we accept. Now, the market is very powerful. That proposal was rolled back. I mean, one-fourth of the voluntary carbon market is sitting in this country, and we can't demand that we should have a floor price, which basically will push high-value projects, better things that will happen for communities. The third is communities must benefit. And that's a given. Now, we have not found this happening. And I'll be very frank with you. I'd love to see examples where it is happening. And as I say, it's a commitment from our side that we will go out and report on what's happening, which is good, because we need to learn from what's happening on the ground. But as yet, the projects we have seen, it's not happening. Whether it's in agriculture, afforestation, biogas, chulas, they're not happening at the scale that communities benefit. Now, again, you and I in this room, we have societal politics in which we say communities must benefit. क्योंकि चीज है, करना चाहिए. अरे गरीब लोग हैं, उनके नाम पे आप कुछ कर रहे हैं, उनको कुछ फायदा मिलना चाहिए. That's our politics. I would argue to you there's another part of it, which is if they don't benefit from it, there'll be no behavior change. Okay? If that chula cost is not paid each year for the amount of carbon that they have reduced because they have used the chula, why will they use the chula? And I think that is a very important part of the behavior change that we need to do, which is people are vested in the business of doing reduction because it is in their interest as well as climate change. उनको लेना देना कि climate change का benefit है. कुछ तो फायदा मिलना चाहिए, मिलेगा फायदा तो वो पेड़ लगाएंगे, पेड़ काटेंगे, फिर लगाएंगे, फिर काटेंगे. अब ये तो नहीं कह सकते कि मैंने आपने एक दफे पेड़ लगा दिया, अब आपने रजिस्ट्री में साइन ऑफ कर दिया, नहीं काट सकते. Who can take the right away of the tree from village communities? We've seen it documented. We've seen it on a piece of paper. That cannot be part of the practice of doing this business. And the last part that I have, and the fourth principle, therefore, and this is something I know most of you will hate me for, is keep it simple. This whole I find it amazing that you have these reams and reams and reams of paper and audit and everything. One, you never find it. Two, when the auditors have gone there, they've never asked the most obvious question. अरे कितनी दफे वो चूल्हा इस्तेमाल हुआ भाई? कैसे आप कहेंगे वो चूल्हा इस्तेमाल हुआ? There is no record of that. And yet you have auditors, verifiers, developers, the whole business. And I don't understand how much money is going to the community versus the developers. Again, one of the African governments had put forward a proposal to say, we want 70% of the money to go directly to the communities. It was a principle. Okay? बाकी का 30% में आपको जो करना आप करिए. वो आपके transaction costs हैं, वो आप वो करिए. मगर 70% goes to the community. Again, sorry to say that proposal was taken back because of the power of the market. It's not the market. It's a market which is making money in the name of climate change. And I'll be very, very, very absolutely clear to you that from my point of view, this is not something we should be supporting. We need to call this out. And we need to do things differently, which is why when Naveen told me that this is the work that AKRSP is supporting, I was completely in favor of it. Because we need to get all our energies together to get, as I keep saying, the societal principles which will drive a private market. For too long have private markets driven societies. This business is about climate change, which is a failure of the markets. We cannot believe that the markets will find us the solution. They will find us the solution if we are able to impose, cajole, and of course propose a system in which the markets are made to work for the interests that we have, which is the interests of climate change, carbon dioxide mitigation, and putting money in the hands of communities and doing everything that we need to be done, whether it's ecosystem services, whether it is planting trees, whether it is soil regeneration, whether it is biodiversity conservation, whether it is alternate energy systems. These are critical for our future. But let's not, and I really believe, and that's why I hope you will forgive me if I have been very frank with all of you, but I've treated you as my community here. And so I can say, and actually just spill my heart out to all of you to say, let's do this differently, and we can. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Narayan, for your very strong words and also for being a very strong voice towards accountability in this space and so many other environmental discourses. As a friend of CGEMS, and as so many of you would also be friends of CGEMS and AKRSPI, we know that CGEM and the intent of this conclave is also to build different guardrails towards creating a win-win situation in the ecosystem services, the carbon ecosystem. So now this brings me to The next part of our agenda, for which I invite the CGIM team on stage to outline the vision behind this conclave and set the agenda for the next 2 days. Sajesh.
Thank you, Vibhusha. Thank you, Sunita ma'am. What a powerful speech. I only heard the last of it because I was roaming around, but I was so moved. Thank you so much. For many of you who do not know me, I'm Strajesh Gupta. I lead CGIM in some sense along with my team. Uh, and as we move forward, I am so excited to see you all. This particular conclave has been 4 years in the making. This particular initiative has been the 4 years in the making, and we hope to take it forward with all of you together. This is India's carbon moment, and we are moving from extraction towards equity. And we want every one of you to feel the same way. All right. What is the one trend that we have been seeing for the past, I would say, 7 years? Carbon economy is expanding. It's not just the words, it's actually expanding in terms of what projects you can do, in terms of where you can work, in terms of how many registries are there, in terms of how many project developers are there, in terms of how many people now know about carbon markets. You can safely say carbon markets are expanding. But governance of carbon markets lagging behind. Because these are voluntary carbon markets, the governance has always taken a voluntary role of slap on the wrist sort of a thing. Investment is also rising, but safeguards for communities are not just there anymore. And the choices we make today will determine whether these markets actually work for communities or actually expand inequalities as it goes forward. There are three core challenges to the market. The first, as we call it, information asymmetry. The market players know a lot more than the people on the ground. The market players know a lot more than people who are trying to govern them. And this kind of asymmetry always leads to exploitation of some sense. The second problem is data systems are fragmented. You cannot find, if I ask any one of you, ki tell me, where, tell me names of 5 carbon projects, where they are, who they are working with, how many farmers are there, is there benefit sharing, what kind of MRV they are using. It's with different people altogether. And lastly, the most value is captured upstream and not by the people who are actually doing work on the ground. This is the incentive misalignment that we are seeing as a trend in the market today. What we want to do, we want to re-engineer what is happening right now. We want to do two things. First, improve transparency, open access of information and market intelligence for everyone.
carbon market ecosystem in India. So may I invite the CGIM team to begin the presentation. We have with us Mr. Siddharth Dabi from CGIM.
Thank you so much, Vibhusha. I think before we begin with the presentation around the landscape study, I would like to kind of use Sunita ma'am's time here before she runs away because I know she has to go somewhere. So can I please request Sunita ma'am, Naveen ji, uh, Prashant, Professor Gopal, and Shrajesh onto the stage so that we can formally launch the landscape study. Uh, Please. मैम पहले लॉन्च कर देते फिर प्रेजेंट कर ही लेते हैं I was a little worried about you.
नहीं नहीं मैं तुम्हें सुनने
Thank you, thank you.
Hi, yes, of course. Hi, good to see you, Gopal. You come here. You know how photographers want it.
I think we can have a little more sound in the room. Yeah.
Until till date 2026, we are still talking about the same things that communities have not receiving benefits, same things around lack of transparency, information, and so on and so forth. In this study, what we are trying to do is okay. We are trying to bring together four landscapes: the policy landscape, the market landscape, the technology landscape, and the grassroots landscape together to create an integrated view of what carbon markets looks like, what should be the roadmap ahead. For this landscape study, while we have, of course, researched and reviewed a lot of material that already exists out there, like I said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We have also conducted surveys with over 94 grassroots NGOs, big and small, across India to understand what they know about carbon markets, what they think about it, how they engage with it, and so on and so forth. We conducted expert interviews with over 20 experts coming from different fields, project developers. We spoke to academicians, we spoke to journalists, we spoke to other market players, and we also spoke to certain CSO heads who have been part of carbon projects in one way or the other. We also have tried to create our own little database around carbon projects, just like CSC is doing, where we have analyzed over 12,000 plus voluntary carbon market projects from across registries. We have used the data that was available with CSC from Berkeley, and we made our own additions to it from whatever we could find, and we have tried to analyze that data. So before I get into this, each landscape one by one, I want to highlight that through this presentation, what you will see is contradictions. You will see opposing things that are happening. Okay. So overall, we have been talking that it is not about whether carbon markets will work. Carbon markets are already working, they are thriving, and they're expanding. We can see the numbers here, right? And I don't want to kind of delve into each of these numbers particularly, but there is tremendous growth that is happening in terms of its numbers. But the key question we need to ask is what is happening for climate? Are global emissions really coming down against this big billions of dollars that are being traded? Now, that's a big question, and which we are not able to answer because we don't have the right data. In India, like ma'am has been mentioning, 1/4 of the VCM is India. 24.63% of projects in the voluntary carbon markets come from India. Indian VCM has tremendous growth potential. The projected Indian market size by 2030 could be 49.4 billion. And the PAT scheme that we had is the Perform, Achieve, and Trade scheme, mitigated around 106 million tons CO2 equivalent. So we have a lot of scope to grow, but we need to forge the path for growing right. This is just a brief of the policy landscape. Basically, what I see is that India has had a great opportunity of learning, and we have been very cautious so far with our developments. We were the early players of the CDM market. 2005 was when India registered its first project in the CDM market in Gujarat. And ever since then, we have been sort of a leader in the VCM market. But while others moved very quickly, other countries moved very quickly into developing their domestic markets like the European Union emission trading scheme, India has been cautious. What India moved into was first the renewable energy certificates, trying to work around that, trying to understand the trade in that. Then we moved into the PAT. We tried some very, very domestic experiments with emission trading systems in cities like Surat, just to see how it all works. And now, well, while we are still developing our Indian mechanisms, be it our emissions trading system, or be it our voluntary carbon market, which is a domestic carbon market, or the green credit system, we have tremendous scope and potential to shape them because the policies are still underway. So I believe that the discussions that we have today would be great input that each one of us can forward push it in our own capacities. Now, here is the contradiction. We see a lot of number of projects happening. We see a lot of billions of dollars being traded, but credits are concentrated only in two registries, primarily in Vera. After followed that is gold standard. Now, this is a little problematic because we are concentrating on methodologies, we are concentrating into registries, not allowing diversity of rules, not allowing the flexibility to go into registries that might be cheaper to enter into compared to a Vera or a gold standard. Why? Because the market is only buying credits from certain registries. So I think that needs to change. So while there are big numbers in terms of trade is concentrated, which is a problematic. Uh, this is a little analysis we did for the projects in India. We tried to analyze the Lorentz curve of the different VCM projects that India is there. And our Gini coefficient is 0.89. That means we have very, very high inequality in Indian carbon setting projects. The inequality is that most of your credits that are currently coming out of the Indian market are coming only from 1.2% projects. Rest of the projects, over 52.4% of the projects are generating less than 100,000 credits. This is where I see where the failure to incorporate smallholder innovative projects lies. The 1.2% projects are largely the large-scale renewable energy projects, particularly the hydro energy projects. When we talk about agroforestry, agriculture-related projects, or biochar and other things that are emerging, they have a very, very tiny share and their credit generation is very low. I think this is something that needs to change. And this is the opportunity for the Indian voluntary carbon market segment that is emerging. How do we reduce the value chain? How do we kind of make it easy to enter into the markets? As we talk about ease of doing business, I think the ease of doing carbon projects also needs to somewhere come so that communities, smaller organizations can get into carbon markets and deliver high quality programs. So it is not really about just delivering the carbon credits. but it's also about the impact on ground. What we often, I think, sideline by saying co-benefits. I think they're not just co-benefits. It's not co. I think they are core benefits that need to be focused while we look at carbon projects. In the Indian market, like I mentioned, the entire concentration of credits comes from the renewable energy. And the CSC report definitely calls them non-additional, right?
Recording in
I think there are
progress.
2 or 3 questions that I would, which for which we do not have an answer, but we'd like to put forth to you. Is one, does proving high integrity using technology necessarily need to be a rabbit's hole? Because every time there is a talk about high integrity and there is a certain scam happening in the carbon markets, the load falls on having more surveillance, more technology, more data, so that we can prove that this credit was genuine. But in the process, we're increasing the costs. I find that a bit paradoxical, and I think we should work around that. How do we have trust in data? And that trust in data, I think, comes from the point where Shajesh was mentioning that the third party is hired by the first party. I think these sort of contradictions need to be answered so that we can have trust that what we are saying is true. And the other person believes in, just the way I believe when the buyer says, I have bought carbon credits and all emissions to meet my net zero, we trust them, right? Because the report looks very fancy. But what happens on the ground is very messy. It doesn't look fancy. It is soil, it is leaves, it's dirt. So we are constantly struggling to prove that the soil was actually holding carbon. So I think we need to work around these, and these are some open questions from CGEM side to all of you. Uh, there is a lot of scope in terms of how registries functions. Registries are not talking to each other, right? And that is where the whole question comes. Someone filing KML files where already, a project has already started. Farmers could easily get onto some other project, and so on and so forth. So I think this entire thing about creating, a lot of people are talking about creating meta registries. I hope there is some sort of a meta registry, but an accessible meta registry where we can clearly see what's happening, what data is there, what methodologies are there, and so on and so forth. And there is, of course, an equity access gap. So while if we see the global south in whole, concentration production is definitely in India and China, right? The African countries, Latin America are lagging way behind. Similarly, within India, the credit focus or the credit generation is focused in Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Rajasthan, primarily because of renewable energy projects. Bihar, Assam, many of the eastern states or the Himalayan states, they're all lagging. So I think that is, again, an equity access gap that we should work around with. Uh, Moving to the grassroots landscape. Now, if you see this survey and kind of think about my earlier slides where I was talking about how big the market is, here we see a clear contradiction that are there, right? 96% believe, all right, 96% believe that carbon markets can support them in some way. 84% have never participated in carbon credit markets. We have over 96% who are also saying that they don't know whom to approach. A lot of NGOs don't know whom to approach because it's all very confusing. 70% non-participants actively looking for opportunities. 45% were approached by developers, but 9 of them say we need some form of support to get into carbon markets. And that NGO talking to a project developer is, it all starts with often big promises of big money, and then suddenly it jumps into NDAs, complex agreements, and things like that. That's where the mismatch happens. That is, I think, where CGEM was also born, to speak between these two worlds and help the grassroots understand the market lingo. Yeah. In all of this, I think information asymmetry and knowledge gap are the two main highlights for us in the NGO survey. There is a lot of, I would say, excitement in NGOs wanting to get into this. Primarily, I see for two large reasons. One, definitely they see the value that it would add to their programs, existing programs. And second, how this is an additional stream of supporting their own programs on the ground, which is good because globally the entire funding scenarios and the landscape is changing very dynamically. So this sort of a blending with the market mechanism is definitely a good welcome opportunity. Uh, of course, I'm borrowing all of this from the CSE study, and also, back in 2009 when I did my own study. Things have not really changed, so I will not delve into this. But essentially, what we are seeing is that one, farmers do not know what's happening. They sign up onto agreements, being promised multiple things, but the real picture is, so what we are constantly talking about is that farmers need to be made aware. That is through stakeholder consultations and free prior informed consent. But this free prior informed consent can't be a one time thing. It has to be an ongoing process. Consent is something, not a one time contract, right? You keep revising your consent, considering you are happy in that project, right? Just in a marriage, once you marry, it doesn't mean that you'll stay married for 50 years, right? You might want to change your mind. So I guess we need to give farmers this sort of freedom and independence, that consent is needs to be revised consistently. Uh, I think the six structural failures in the Indian VCM that CGEM sees is this. One, there is tremendous opacity. Second, there is information extraction. I see that all the carbon projects, particularly in the NBS segment, necessarily because of the kind of methodologies that are there, are extracting a lot of data from the farmers. Which pesticides did you use? How much did you use? What is your soil doing? Give me your land records, bank records, Aadhaar, so on and so forth. But what about this data? Who protects it? What if this data is misused? How do we bring in strong data protection and data rights into this? So I think that information extraction is happening a lot, but this data that is taken and processed never reaches back to the farmer, because essentially we are treating the farmer or the community as a beneficiary. We're not treating them as produce very strongly that this needs to change. Farmers and communities are produce, your buyers, right? We are holding buyers in very high esteem, but farmer beneficiary. I think that is very, very paradoxical, contradictory, and wrong. I think we need to change that. Sharing again, there is no writing in, as ma'am mentioned, but it is something I believe we, with our strong power of 24% and so on and so forth, we should force for such things. Unfair contracts. I mean, there are amazing contracts we have read. Contracts that say that if the farmer chooses to leave a project for whatever reasons, there is a penalty. There are contracts which don't even mention the benefit sharing at all. There are contracts where NGOs are more like gig economy workers, just providing farmers for onboarding process, not really a part of the design of how a carbon project looks like. Because, like I said, a carbon project is not merely about sequestering or removing carbon. It's about the broader development and environmental safeguarding that happens with it, right? So that is completely missing. Uh, and this is a buyer's market, unfortunately. So when the buyer, we happened to speak to some agency that was aggregating carbon credits, and they said, "Sir, we'll be doing a due diligence of you, your organization, and of all the farmers from where these credits are being generated. But can we do the due diligence of who is buying? No, That is completely missing for us. We don't even know who the buyer is because the aggregator won't tell you who the buyer is. So these are big challenges that we are facing. And the last is the complex value chain. Now, I didn't put that picture here, but the value chain of carbon markets is very convoluted, and farmers are at the fag end of this value chain, where all the value is obviously concentrated, as ma'am mentioned, with the buyers, with all the middlemen players, aggregators, and so on and so forth. I think we are at a very opportune moment in India right now where we can center the grower into the value chain, create the value chain around them, and fairly distribute what the value is. I'm not saying that all the value should just go to the farmers necessarily, but it has to be fair. And we need to understand the hard work and the risk that communities take getting into carbon projects. It is far more risky for them than any VC investing some money into it because their actual homes depend on them. And so there are, of course, we have been talking slightly more negative aspects of the carbon, but there are definitely certain good cases out there. One of them is in India, the Khasi Hills Red Project. I think it's a very, very transparent program. They have put out as much information as they could transparently out to people. It's a very beautifully community centric driven Red Plus program, which is very, very rare in the world because most of the Red Plus that I keep reading are totally scams. There is this beautiful program in Kenya on mangroves where the community and their local forest department of Kenya got together, created this very bottom up design of how to go ahead with mangrove plantations, incorporate that into carbon markets along with a Scottish NGO. And they are doing this very beautiful program over there. And of course, there's other case in Tasmania. So there are very, very few but inspiring cases out there. And I think we hope that we will all together be able to create many more such inspiring cases. I will skip through this because I want our respondents to get enough time. But we do have a great opportunity with Article 6.2 because Article 6.2, because voluntary carbon markets, I think the biggest problem is this whole voluntary nature of it doesn't allow scrutiny. Article 6.2 has a governance structure. So scrutiny becomes kind of embedded into it, which can be used for very good things. And we have a good scope for high integrity premium projects in India. And we can create tech which can enable the smallholder much better. And of course, there is a whole policy advocacy window that is open to us. I think with this, I would like to end my presentation over here. The question is not whether growers can participate in this market, right? They're already participating. The question is, can their participation be made more fair and more beneficial to them? So thank you so much. With this, I would like to invite Prashant and Professor Gopal onto the stage and for their responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Um, I would like to quickly introduce our next set of panelists. We invite Dr. Gopal Sarangi from the Terry School of Advanced Studies, an eminent scholar working on energy markets and regulation and green finance for a variety of financing issues like climate and carbon markets. And Mr. Trishant Dev from the Center for Science and Environment, an expert working on climate trade, green industrial policy, and of course, carbon markets.
This particular work, they're contributing many ways. Thanks to CL Subibhusa, who is our student. Thanks to CL Subibhusa, who is our student. What I'm going to do is that I'm not going to take much time. I'll reflect on some broader perspective of what exactly is happening. Just drawing from what Sunita ma'am just said in the very beginning, is the question that is, I'm just here to raise some questions which might be critical for all of us to think about it because of the kind of development that we're encountering. Let us first ask this question that's very clear. If you look at the policy, I'll start with this, that the policy on climate change in India is very clear. If you let us look at the timeline 2047, we said that we want to be a developed country, and our climate goals are 2070. So from the policy landscape, it's very clear for all of us that our priority is to be a developed country. And of course, climate considerations should come later. That doesn't mean that we are not doing enough on the climate change frontier. That's true. So our developmental priorities, be it, if let's go back to the conventional developmental indicators, you talk of unemployment, poverty, inequality, which are the three triads of the developmental indicators, clearly tells us that these are much more prioritized items for developmental items compared to what we're thinking about. Now, when it comes to climate change, I think it is also important for all of us to think about the fact that we also prioritize on co-benefits because there is a trade-off. It's very clear when you do certain activities, do that in the classroom also. When you do certain activities for climate change, it might create some kind of negative impacts for development. So, from the policy perspective, it's so very clear that you pick off those activities which are creating or generating co-benefits. And that's very clearly, rightly said. Co-benefits is something which need to look at that. There's a lens when you think about carbon market. So we need to use that lens to understand that you pick up activities which generate more co-benefits. That's very much pronounced when we think about voluntary carbon market space also. Let me come back to the question of carbon market. And all of us know, those who are in the room, because we are aware about that, the climate change has two angles, mitigation and adaptation. Now, when it comes to mitigation, now let us think about the carbon market. If you look at the origination of the carbon market, the principle, the conventional basis on which the whole edifice of the carbon market is built is the mitigation. Now, the question is that why then? And if you let's look at what India is doing. If you look at India's share of emissions, it's usually said 7 to 8%, which needs to be demystified. But that's actually not true. Why? Let's go back to the legacy emission, historical emissions. India's rank is not third; it's actually eighth, and the share is only 3 to 5%, 3.5%. Now the question is not only that. What is being negotiated? Sunita Ma'am knows about that. Is the per capita emission. Now the question is that if mitigation is not our priority, probably that much not prioritize the policy discourse, then why are you getting into carbon market? The question that has been discussed. And what has been historically put forward is that it's not only about mitigation. Mitigation has one role. The carbon market has a priority role that it should actually take care of mitigation. But beyond mitigation, there are other roles, which this report only highlights. Is the fact that second role is that carbon market could possibly help us in generating or mobilizing finance for climate change, which is much needed for a country like India, because our adaptation requirement is quite heavy. Sunita Ma'am referred to that. It's only 1 to 2% of the entire private funding is directed towards adaptation. Most of these are for mitigation, because mitigation activities can be converted into project-led activities, ROI-based activities. So is it possible to direct, if you look at all pillars of carbon market, you talk of your ETS, which is cap and trade, you talk of 6.2, you talk of 6.4, you talk of VCM, primarily 4 pillars. Green credit is there. CBAM is not a carbon market. CBAM is more of a pricing kind of instrument. So you have 6 pillars. And each of these pillars, what we're essentially trying to understand is whether each of these pillars have direct or indirect provisions for climate financing. And I can take you back to the CDM also. CDM also, we decided that some amount of money could be kept aside for climate adaptation funding. That didn't happen. CDM, one of the major criticisms of CDM, I'm already told us many things of CDM, is that the low-hanging fruits were actually exhausted by the developed countries. Now, that is another major issue. Not only that, CDM was also expected to bring in the technology, which didn't happen. CDM was expected to develop the local development, which didn't. Expected that it should contribute to the adaptation funding. That also didn't realize that much. But what do you see here? If India can possibly, I think the problems that we face is implementation problem. So it is possible for each of these pillars has provision. Which is more pronounced in recent days is the role of carbon market in stabilizing the temperature.
There's a discussion happening that in last year, you already have crossed the 1.5-degree temperature. Temperature stabilization has already been crossed. Now, whether carbon market could possibly help us to bring this temperature back. There is a discussion happening that you emit now and the mitigation can happen in future. Can that be possible? Carbon market, if effectively be implemented, could possibly help us to do that. How? There is a whole range of CDR projects. Even Siddhartha ji also mentioned about that. So whole range of CDR projects, but highly controversial. The price is very high. If those projects could possibly implemented, then possibly you can think of acting this CDR could be helping us in stabilizing the temperature. Now there is third reason why should India enter into the fourth reason, in fact, is that there is an international pressure which is coming in terms of BCAs. Look at what's happening CBAM. Whether you want it or don't want it, you have to do it. The problem, so these are essentially the reasons why should India enter into the carbon market, but in a very cautious trajectory, otherwise it might create misleading outcomes. Now let me come back to discuss other things. Just quickly to reflect on what kind of contradictions we're actually encountering. Let us look at what's happening at the, because when you talk about carbon market, it's happening at different layers, different scales. Internationally, you have CBAM, BCAs coming up. Norway is planning one, UK is planning one, Canada is planning one, Australia is planning one. All these would impacting India significantly. All of us know about the impact of CBAM on steel industry. Now, nationally, you have CCTS getting framed. The architecture is being built, right? It might go down to the subnational level also. And on the ground level, all of us since morning have been discussing about BCM. But the question is that what extent these different pillars, I told you there are primarily four pillars, BCM 6.2, 6.4, and your ETS. Of course, they operate in different ways. So BCM 6.2, 6.4 are baseline crediting, and your ETS is cap and trade. Now, the question that we need to think about very carefully is that what kind of boundary conditions exist for each of these markets? And that creates a lot of contradictions. Let me tell you few contradictions. One is that recently there's a delegation visited from UA, and it's known as the mother of all deals. And they clearly said that the accrediting agencies from India, we don't recognize you. Now, the problem is that in CBAM, the boundary is cradle to get. In CCTS, you have get to get. How do you make them compatible? The problem is, let's, for example, if you're putting up a project on 6.2, I sell the credits to Japan. I need to do the corresponding adjustment, ITMOJ and all that. The problem is, can these reduction of emissions be converted into the benefits that I can get from CBAM? If I get that, probably the industry would get doubly benefited. Otherwise, it's problematic. I'll come back to the VCM. The boundary condition of VCM is much more complicated. Mamas has been pointing out since morning is the fact that one is that how to ensure that the VCM benefits are actually translated into expected benefits that we do. Now, what could possibly be done? What is being discussed at the top level may not help you, because one of the discussions happening in revisiting, renewing the VCM market is through the ICVCM you refer to and BCMI, right? You have core carbon principles, claims of code. They're coming up with new standards to ensure that the carbon credits generated through the VCM is true, measurable, permanent, additional. So these are the characteristics. We don't really have much time to get into each of these. Now the question is that how could, let's for example, it's an investment-led project. You put up a carbon credit project in agriculture. I belong to Orissa, so in my village, let's say. Now we expect that this project will lead to local sustainable development, but actually in practice, it will reverse the thing. Why? Because you are using the soil, you are using the local air, you are using the local water, you are using the road infrastructure. What is if it is investment-led project, there are only few parties, two parties transacting that you do in the classroom, third party getting impacted, the negative externality. Now it's not really leading to local sustainable development, might kind of create another set of problem that we encounter in CDM, right? Now, what could possibly be done, right? One way of looking at this is that when you say voluntary carbon market is unregulated, that's not true. Why? Because voluntary carbon market is indirectly regulated. How? Let's, for example, you put up a forestry project. Now you are also governed by the local forest laws. Is it possible to embed that in the state laws?
that you ensure that the projects that are doing also in alignment with the state laws, if it is state subject. So these are essentially the boundary conditions we need to think about because the things are evolving, as I said. So how these different pillars are interacting with each of them. If I am getting benefit from 6.2, can that benefit be accrued when I convert my sector to under the CPAM? Can I think of the European Union ETS is recognizing and acknowledging the credits which are issued by the Indian carbon market? They said, yes, it can be done. But the problem, you have to apply multiplier. Your carbon price rate is just like $10 per credit. Unka 110, 120 already. So how many multipliers will be applied? So we need to have a coordination across all different pillars. So what I feel is that it's my understanding, drawing from the very good study done by CJ. One thing is very clear is that we need to create the awareness. Many people in this room also, most of us, do not really understand the detailed nitty-gritties of the individual carbon market architecture. So you neither create awareness, build the capacity. There is clear information asymmetry. So people at the ground level, those are actually the producers, they do not know what's happening. And it's so dynamic. Every time you come up with a new rule, new regulation, how we're expecting a farmer who is very scared to open his account, how you're expecting him to know everything about additionality? What does he know about regulatory surplus? What does he or she know about the investments of your additionality criteria? What is common practice? How do you define that? So these are the debated questions. We need to contextualize them and ensure that, as has been discussed since morning, that the benefits are actually accrued to the right person in right manner in right time. Thank you so much.
May I now invite Mr. Dev to present his reflections? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, CJM, for inviting me, and congratulations on your report. I think all the information that I wanted to share has preceded me. A lot has been talked about of our report. I think I would like to talk about the different landscapes that you've presented, starting with the policy landscape. First, we have to understand that carbon market is not a single thing. When you talk about a cap and trade system, when we talk about offset markets, they're very different entities. The only common denominator for all of them is that they share a single unit, that is carbon, except that everything is different. So the solutions also have to be different. That's why perhaps your report is also very comprehensive, looking at the landscape. We like to present markets as an elegant economic solution. But as anyone who has ever tried to understand them, they know that it comes with a very thick rule book. One of the lessons that we have learned from our study on the voluntary carbon market in India is that there is a need, there is very limited regulatory oversight. But by that, we do not mean to add more regulations to cause entry barriers. What we want is to address specific things: transparency, accountability, and as ma'am has already stated, what we also want from the market is to keep it simple. All kinds of rules exist. We are seeing number of labels coming up, but what we see is that the letter of the law is duped and the spirit of the law is disregarded. I'll give you an example. When we were looking at when we were doing our study, one of the things that I came across constantly on a number of projects was how they mentioned the location of the project, which is a requirement that gold standard Vera puts for the project developer to put in the project design document. In one of the project developers, there was a consistent pattern across all the documents where under the location header, there was a link that led to the Geography of India page. How is that helpful for me to understand where are the carbon market projects based? So how did the registry approve this kind of specification that the project developer gave? India is one of the largest offset market, as has already been shared. if there is so much interest in the market and so many are pinning hopes on it, it is in our interest find out how effective they are in what they claim to do. And that is broadly three things: offset emissions, benefit community, and push money in projects that cannot be funded otherwise. CSE's efforts to understand this 2 years ago, unfortunately, did not paint a very good picture. And as transparency has been spoken about earlier, when you are claiming a public good, when you're claiming a public benefit out of carbon credit, how are you not willing to share where that public good is coming from? When I offset my travel from a flight, should I not have the right to know where that offset is coming from? What is the project that is offsetting my flight? This is also linked to the information asymmetry thing that has been spoken about and has been put in the report that talks about how a certain part of the market is well aware of what goes on. The other part of the market does not understand even what a carbon credit is. Then the question of paying the price for the actual change, paying the price for the actual project, which Sunita ma'am talked about in case of the biogas projects that we looked, the case of renewable energy projects that we looked. We don't want communities in India to subsidize the emissions of corporates in the West. That is a simple ask. And that's why we need to demand a real price for the credits. I think with your study and with this conference, what we would want to understand is whatever our findings were, how have they changed? What is the conversation now? And since the size of the market is so big and it sets a precedent for the entire world, be it how we regulate Article 6, how we regulate the voluntary carbon market, I think it is very important for us to discuss what is going on and how are we reaping the benefits of all the things, all the materials that we have put out in the public. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gopal and Mr. Trishant. Before we conclude conclude this session, we would like to invite Mr. Naveen Patidar to felicitate Ms. Sunita Narayan. I think we can go downstairs only for that. Yeah. Yeah. I would also request Siddharth to kindly felicitate Dr. Gopal and Mr. Trishant. Let's wait for the photo.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So with this, we conclude the first session of this day. And to take you through the next bit of what comes, we thought it'll be nice to mix up some voices. So I invite Harpal from AKR SBI to take us through what comes next.
Thank you, Vibhusha. Thank you very much, Professor Sarangi and Mr. Dev, for your insightful reflection on the landscape study. And thank you very much, Siddharth, for providing the much needed insights on carbon markets and ecosystems of the country. The study clearly reflects the no what are the gaps and where they are, as well as what and where are the potentials of improvement. Moving further in our agenda, we now have a dialogue session titled "Carbon Markets at an Inflection Point: From Volume to Value." For this, I would like to invite the panelists for the session, Mr. Jasmeet Singh, CEO of Foundation for Climate Friendly Solutions India, uh, Mr. Swapan Mehra, CEO of Aura Ecological Solutions, Mr. Naveen Horo, Country Project Lead at GIZ India, and Mr. Mrinal Ranjan, General Manager at NABARD. And to moderate the discussions, I would like to invite Miss Soumya Rakhe, Manager Nature-Based Solutions at Asuta. May I invite all the panelists and moderator on the stage, please. Thank you. No, no, you make please. Which order? There's an order.
Good morning, all. First of all, thank you so much, CGEM, for organizing this conference. And the first two sessions have been really, really inspiring and thought provoking. And this leads to a very, very important question that all of us are trying to address today, which is understanding this inflicting point from volumes to values. And to start this session, we've seen that the carbon markets have drastically increased in the last decade, more so focus being on the nature-based solution projects. While the nature-based solution projects are increasing on a year-by-year basis, we also see a lot of questions around these projects. There are multiple concerns regarding co-benefits, or as Siddharth has coined the word, core benefits, environmental integrity. I would first like to throw a question to the panel and understand what this inflicting point is, and why are we seeing this turn from more of conventional credits towards the value based credits. What is this inflection point? So probably we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you. How much time we have? I think we are running late a bit.
We have about 40 minutes.
40.
Yeah,
Fine. Thank you. So I think the inflection point is, despite all the criticism of what we have listened to till time, I think it's a natural maturation of what is happening. So we remember the CDM days. The focus was on scale, how much area has been covered, how much credits have been generated. So now gradually, with more players coming into the field, our net zero commitments, our NDCs, I think the focus is now not only to demonstrate that the carbon projects are able to decarbonize the system, but also to show that there is additionality, it is real, it is measurable, and as everybody was saying before me, the farmer, the community is at the center of the development. I'll stick my neck out and I'll say that now we should change the narrative. Should we? I don't know. Carbon project should not be seen as a core and benefits to the farmer as a co-benefit. Rather, we will say that the ecology restoration, the livelihood creation, income generation of the farmers should be the narrative for the core project components, and credit as a co-benefit, possibly particularly in the Indian context. So when it comes to value, it is environmental integrity, it is alignment with the NDCs, the net zero commitments, it is developmental impacts, particularly for NBS solutions, NBS schemes, and for institutions like NABARD. I think this shift towards volume to value is totally aligned with what we have been doing for the last 30, 40 years, keeping community at the core and seeing carbon projects not only as a sequestering solution, but also as a uh, livelihood creation and giving other benefits to the farmers.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me in the panel. It's a good opportunity to share your thoughts. While reflecting the question, while my co-panelists were answering, I was gathering the thoughts. What should I say about the inflection point? And the presentation, Siddharth Bhai has presented 24% supply coming from India. I start debating in my head whether it's a 24% supply from India is the right narrative that we are the leader or not. Because when we are saying inflection point, or we can say restart, it's a very fun question I asked during the workshops. How old is the carbon market? Answers are it's 20 years old. Kyoto started 2007. It's 10 years old when Paris Agreement signed and a private sector push towards climate action. Answers are 4 5 years back when VC start putting the money. Lot of startups ventured into the system, and nature-based solution becoming a new buzzword. So all three answers are correct in terms of the carbon market. 24% supply is also constituted of all kind of good, bad, ugly credits. So supply inflection point is, I would say, India is going to become the largest supplier of high quality carbon credits. It's still a question mark, and responsibilities carries with us. We might be marginalized in the global supply with 4 5%, and also can re-attain the high quality 24% supply. So these questions are, I would say, open ended, and I'm less concerned about volume to value. Volumes are, we cannot deny that. The moment you are asking any big corporate buyer, they are not interested in $1 2 million or 1 2 million credits coming out of it, because their emissions are high. So volumes are always haunted us, that how we should create a large scale projects while keeping value intact. So far, India is poses more problems when it's come to attracting large scale investments, because we are talking about fragmented lands, smallholder farmers, land ownership. So these are in a way good pieces on the ground, that there is a scope of good development, but also create barrier for large scale investments into the picture. So my inflection point is, we cannot discount volumes. If we are talking about retaining 24 25% supply in the global through the carbon markets, we cannot discount the volumes. And value is there, but it has two narratives. For us, value means, and it's again coming from the my own experience, a same project, buyer is ready to pay high premium for vintages coming out in 2024, but vintages coming in 2018 and 19, the value is not there. So all the design, trees, farmer benefit is not going to change for 2018 credits to 2025. If third party rating agencies are giving high rating, if methodology is not something old CDM1 and the new Vera ones. So these are the mechanical way of perceiving the value of the project. But the actual value, if I will resonate with sir, that how much livelihood has been created, that is the value, which is not can be mechanically. As of now, the current system doesn't. The rating agencies, the certification agencies, the auditors, those are having more standardized guidebooks. So how much biodiversity has been improved, what is the water savings. So those are all the value creation points which is right now not taken into consideration while we are planning and designing the projects, and it's still very much a value game. Not even a single project with 500 farmer can make a difference to attract commercial capital, so that the real money, the real pricing they can attract. They have to be consolidated 10, 15,000 farmers coming together and convince all the due diligence and the buyers. And that is good or bad, the reality on the ground is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And firstly, congratulations to AKRSP and CGEM on this workshop, on launching this report. I know it's been a labor of love, and you guys have been really working on trying to see how best we can structure this market to work for the key stakeholder, our communities and smallholders. So I'm going to speak from two perspectives. And one is being probably one of the, from what I can see, three professionals from the beginning of the CDM era there. I can look at Inderjeet and Naveen, and we've been looking at carbon markets and their origin for the last 20 years nonstop. And I must mention that when we actually, as a student of ecological economics, when we started seeing traction in the carbon markets, I, for one, was very happy because even till date, carbon markets are the only truly global scale proof of concept that you can make an environmental market work and pay for action on ground to custodians of nature, of ecosystems, to be doing the right thing, which is offsetting others in many ways sins, right? So it's a really good example of something that the world has come together to try and work. That's one perspective. The second perspective is as the CEO and founder of IORA Ecological Solutions, which for the last 14 years has been trying to find development on nature-based solution programs and projects in India, trying to see how we can get investments in restoration, in conservation, through various channels, philanthropy, through public debt, and through markets. And to see how carbon markets have now actually transformed in many ways in the last 3 to 4 years as truly being a very good of getting investment from sources into nature that was, hitherto unheard of. When I started working in this space, it was very unusual to have a company that is putting up data centers or to have a company which is manufacturing beverages invest in forestry. So I think that credit firstly is due to the carbon market as a key enabler. Now, this inflection point, Soumya, your question is very pertinent. This inflection point, I'd like to explain from my perspective 3 dimensions of this inflection point. Firstly, it's very good that we are at this inflection point because it represents a virtue in the market that players in the market are recognizing that there are challenges with the way projects are being done currently. And we must now include in projects dimensions beyond just basic carbon development to make sure that these projects do right by key stakeholders, which is the ecology, the community, and environment. So it's a very positive sign that we are discussing this. My second opinion on this is that it's very challenging. And it's challenging because the challenges that we are trying to address, many of them are challenges of the carbon market, but many of them are structural challenges of agriculture and community-based project development in general. Issues related to rights, to tenures, to get a premium for the right kind of agriculture produce is a big challenge. Look at where we are with organic food, right? Even after decades of trying, I think the global marketplace for organic foods is less than 1% of the total food sold in the world. That's the premium that the world is willing to pay. So it's challenging. It's challenging, but the reason why we're in a good place to use, this is my third point, is that this inflection is a very useful inflection because in many ways it could become the means to actually drive many of the structural changes, but it won't be done alone by the carbon market players. It will require all of us to come together. But it's the measurement, it's the certainty, it's the kind of buyers who enter the carbon market who are in a better place to bring together a lot of policy, non-policy thought to act on these particular interventions. Now, what are these interventions and what's driving them? So there are, I think, 2 things driving this really interesting phrasing that you've done from volume to value. Firstly, I agree with my colleague here that I don't think it's either an or, if we really its true potential of, and the true potential is not only to decarbonize buyers, the true potential is to also restore India's degraded lands. India has 128 million hectares of degraded land. Out of 60% of that is agricultural land. So if we really want to address all of these challenges, we'll have to work together with a number of stakeholders. But the spear lies the carbon market. Ways is a definitive driver of conversations. What's driving things? First is there are a lot of buyers analyzing and putting a price to reputational risk from challenges in projects that might not benefit the communities, that might not benefit ecology in the right manner, which is, I think, a very positive sign. Because fortunately or unfortunately, right now this market is a buyer-driven market. And I completely agree with this point in your report that is there a way for all of us to come together and turn this into a seller-driven market? The problem is that right now the circumstances are not in favor of this becoming a seller-driven market, but we should at least start thinking. So one is the second is that many investors, corporates now have broad nature commitments, not only carbon commitments. They have commitments in terms of reducing their biodiversity footprint, their water footprint. So there is what we call in ecological economics a significant potential of stacking. Stacking benefits that nature projects designed from a goal of carbon can truly deliver, because these projects essentially are able to address many of these commitments. They are able to project nature as a critical infrastructure that can be invested upon. So I think that's the second very, very important sort of driver here. In order to achieve this, we will need to look at both policy, non-policy interventions, right? What are the key drivers of integrity and this inflection? In my opinion, if I was to summarize them, I would summarize them in three buckets. First is permanence. The big bucket and the big challenge here is permanence. How do you invest and make sure that these projects last to deliver the benefit that they're supposed to deliver to communities and to ecology? And permanence is actually not only a monitoring feature, it's actually a governance and investment feature, right? How are you designing the right agroforestry models that appeal to the community's long-term economic interest in addition to just carbon? How are you bringing communities to the center of what you're doing? But at the same time, how are you bringing investors to the center of recognizing that these agroforestry models are the right models? There is a big challenge there because investors have their hurdle rates of IRRs, the market is dwindling. So it's something that all of us have to work together to bridge a gap on. There is a tremendous lack of capacity. So there's permanence. We need to assure permanence, which is a governance issue. It's an economic issue. It's not only a monitoring issue as it is made out to be very often. And that requires fundamental changes in the design of our work. The second is additionality. I think we heard a lot about additionality in the morning. I would again go on the edge and say that additionality is also a governance challenge. How do we prove additionality versus what is additional are very, very different arguments. We need to look at that seriously. We need to do things which are additional, not only in the pure economic sense. The pure economic additionality is an interesting argument, but there has to be additionality in the sense of livelihood, in the sense of country activities, which requires a lot of coordination. The third is measurement. At the moment, these co-benefits are only accounted for, not really measured. How can we leverage technology and advancements to really very deeply measure co-benefits? I know a lot of investors who would pay a significant premium if you are able to measure biodiversity very accurately in your nature-based solution projects. We've done a transaction for our Meghalaya agroforestry projects. We did biodiversity indices, etc., and we were able to sell carbon at 40 euros a ton. But it's extremely costly. It's prohibitive. The data is not available. And I think that's another thing that I really feel that a platform like CGM needs to work on is to open up databases. Our government is not unlocking databases when it comes to spatial data, biodiversity data that exists. If you layer that on to the cost of a project developer, it's never going to work. So I think that these are some important drivers that we need to work on if we really have to leverage this inflection for improvement in the carbon markets, but also to drive towards structural improvements in land management on the whole. And that burden is everybody's. I want to reiterate that it's not a burden only of carbon market players, because this is, even now, guys, it's a fringe market. We did a survey with the World Economic Forum and CII of nature investors in India and investments in India. Our survey showed that 89% of all nature investment in India is still the public sector. that 11 sector is broken down into philanthropy, CSR, and then the tiniest bit, which is probably less than 5%, is carbon and actual NBS investors. So while we are the tip of the spear is huge. So we need to think of not how this is wrong, but how the right here can drive the bigger right. Thank you.
Um, Thanks a lot. Let's look at a quick sort of a perspective of why we are sitting here and why we are even talking about carbon markets, right? As global citizens, all of us in this room are impacted by climate change. We are needing food on our plates today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and in the future. And all of this global burden is now resting on the farmers, right? To produce the food. Now we also see a potential of mitigation from the agricultural sector. So yeah, farmer comes again in the center. Where is the incentive for the farmers to make this shift from the so-called trained conventional agricultural systems, which was more fertilizer intensive, input incentive, to more sustainable ones, right? Whether we call it regenerative, agroecological, nature-based, whatsoever, but more towards sustainable. Where is the incentive for the farmers? And what we have seen as a trend in the last 10, 15 years since this entire carbon market space sort of started sort of developing is the net benefit for the farmers from just carbon market projects is close to about 1,200 to 2,000 maximum per year per farmer. Do you think as a farmer, it is enough incentive to make this shift? So I think carbon markets based incentives are only a top up additional incentive for the farmer. So let's look at the larger picture. So we have to have other incentives in terms of production efficiency, in terms of better market price for the sustainable produce, plus some additional incentives in the carbon markets. So that's the context where we are, right? Why we are at the point of inflection. And that's, I think, many studies have happened. And I'm really glad CGM brought this study on the landscape of markets. CE did this study, CSC did this study. We also were trying to look at what are the current sort of examples of some of these carbon projects that are implemented, of course, with the limitation of data access and all. But what we learned was that in the last 10 years or so, there has been huge increase in the numbers of carbon projects in India. There has been a huge increase of carbon project developers in India as well. Yeah. So there is a lot of growing trend around that. On the contrary, if you look at the carbon price now, it's dipping, right? This is the context of it. Now, what do we need to do? Why are we at a right inflection point? Is because now there is a policy initiative coming in. Now we have enough experiences, at least from the last 10 years, of all the projects, carbon projects that have been implemented in India, good, bad, ugly experiences. Let's learn from it. Can we all co-design this entire governance systems to make sure that there is a value to it? The countries like India, volume is never a challenge. Even if you do a pilot, it will be close to 50,000 farmers, or at least 10,000 farmers. So India gives you that luxury of scale, of volume. What we really need to look at is the value of it. And rightly said, our co-speakers have said that it's a market-driven kind of approach, right? But have we shown the market the true value of what is being generated? Have we been able to communicate the value of these carbon credits, not from the carbon itself, but a carbon credit along with gender value, along with biodiversity value, right? We haven't done that yet. So the true value of what we are doing, what the farmers are doing at the end of the day, is not known to the buyer yet, or we have not packaged it as such, right? And I think it's a really high point now. Like when we saw this entire growth in the sector of carbon markets, I think it was more of a competitive environment. You know? Let's tap into as much of farmers. Let's tap into as much of area. Let's register a project. Can we look at now trying to come in together as project developers, as civil society, as NGOs, as policymakers, create this really transparent governance systems where we talk of increased value to the farmers, right? And that is where we are. I'll make this in brief so that
Thank you so much. Moving on. Jasmeet and Swapan, both of you highlighted a very important point that it's not just value, but also volumes that actually drive the carbon markets. I would also refer to the question that Rajesh threw at all of us. Who shapes the carbon markets? So, Jasmeet, my question is to you. As project developers, how do you think is the role of carbon project developers in um, shaping up markets which focus more towards value, but at the same time do not discount volume?
Okay. So, as a project developer perspective, um, again, I'm coming with a. Is my voice audible? Okay. So, as a project developer, my perspective again coming from like different thoughts, and I'll be brutal honest here that if you are coming from a non-for-profit background, you are pro farmers, development hona chahiye, and everything needs to be go on the ground, whether and understand the difficulties, why it is project is performing with a 60% utility. But if it is coming from more corporate private sector background, that we need reputation. We don't care whether the payments are delayed by 6 months, we miss the monsoon, but you have committed certain numbers, it needs to be hit. So, as a project developer, we have to choose the balance between these two things. Either we can say we are a project developer, or we can call it a aggregator. And FCF India is also a project developer. Are we looking, serving the buyers to identify high quality carbon credits at a lowest rate? Is this the position that we are trying to take into consideration, that all the IT companies, engineering companies, uh, Google, Microsoft stuff, that we will going to bring high quality credits at a lowest cost, or a position which is more non-for-profit driven, that we are going to work around a project design on the ground and fetch a maximum price in the market against and ask all difficult questions to the buyers, not going to open this project to any kind of buyer who is ready to bid the proposal for this particular project. So these are the two positioning which carrying a responsibility as a project developer. Very difficult to balance it out, and it's always tilted. Either if you have raised a lot of capital, then you are answerable and accountable towards your investors, that you have to drive it, and value sometimes on the ground dilute, which is also, I would say, reasonable to demand from for profit companies who are running with the different aspirations. But on the same time, you are the responsibility, you have taken the carbon rights from the farmers. And I don't expect a farmer will need to understand each and every granularity of a carbon project. For them, sapling is there, fencing is there, input is there, market linkage is there, sorted. Whether you are giving 10%, 90% of carbon benefit sharing, it doesn't really matter. It is hardly a 3% of the total impact of the carbon project. So for farmer, when it is coming, that is what they are really looking forward. So it's a responsibility of the project developer, that how they are selling their carbon credits by aggregating and protecting their rights so that they bring maximum value, how they are quantifying the biodiversity, livelihood, community development aspect. So as a project developer, I foresee we need to make it very clear positioning, and both sides are fine in the market, but it doesn't need to be that we are more pro towards farmer, but again we are kind of serving the buyers for identifying and selling the lowest credits, because we need to work around on our investor driven mandates. So that's my understanding, that we have to pick the sides. In between is very difficult, so that it will be very clear to the open market that how these project developers and their mandates are going towards look like in the 20 years and 30 years landscape, whether those project developers bound to exist after 10, 20 years, because if their mandates accomplish, whether the impact is there or not, it will keep moving on the another and keep on shuffling the ships. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, Next question is to you, Swapan. You mentioned about one of your which was in Meghalaya. Uh, it fetched a really good price. So the question is, are we beginning to see a clear premium for few projects which have the value element embedded in it? And what are the factors that determine these premiums?
No, thank you. Yes, I think there is beginning to be a premium for projects that can demonstrate value for sure. The challenge I'll say is that it's not systemic. It's at the moment it's slightly subjective. It's vague. It's on the ability of the developer to be able to project the value, and then it's also open to buyers who are willing to put a premium on that those particular aspects. So there's no system around it yet, but there is beginning to be a premium. There are many buyers in the world now who are willing to pay upwards of $30-$35 per ton of an NBS project, which can clearly demonstrate permanence, additionality, high benefit sharing to communities, concerns for biodiversity, soil health, etc. So that premium is arising, yeah. But we need to mainstream that. We need to mainstream that into an attribute. Building on what Jasmeet was saying, sometimes this is something that a developer can do and the developer can push for, but it's a huge liability on the developer because it means you have to invest a lot upfront. So if we can mainstream this through either regulation or educating more and more of the buyers, then this will be driven a lot more and become much more systemic.
And in your recent interactions with buyers, do you see a rising conscious about what these factors should be where they need to pay a premium?
Yeah. No, there are. I mean, there are two things. One is that I think what's driving this more in buyers is like what I mentioned earlier, avoiding reputational risk. I think that drives premium faster than co-benefits. As a second layer to that is co-benefits. If you're able to showcase co-benefits well, the challenge that buyers see there is measurability because not a lot of project developers are able to put in place measurability for these co-benefits. It's genuinely hard, right? If you have to layer on top of your basic carbon modeling now very detailed biodiversity, carbon, soil, health, water baselines, it's a huge cost. So they are seeking measurability where technology is a potential game changer. But what's driving buyers more is the avoidance of risk. But in general, there are many more buyers than I would say 2 years ago who are willing to have a conversation and diligence your project. Not only, in the CDM days, you had a CDM ID, you had a issuance, you sold. But now buyers go into diligence on all of these things. They want to look at your contract with the farmer. They want to look at how what species you've chosen, etc., etc. By the way, one other thing I want to mention is that I do think that benefit sharing does matter. I wouldn't say that just because carbon is 2 to 3% of the overall cash flow, it doesn't matter whether farmers get 10% or 90%. I think it matters. It matters from accountability, transparency perspective. Ethically, it matters quite a bit. For permanence, it matters quite a bit because one challenge is not only how much your farmer is getting, what also matters is what the neighbor is getting. Because if I'm in Meghalaya, we did a deal where we offered 80%. It was very expensive for us. But I think it matters. The final thing is that if carbon prices go through where they're projected to go through, this will start mattering a lot. I mean, right now we've done a deal at 40. Deals around 30, 40 have become slightly more common now. And there's an estimate that in 3, 4 years, the price will cross $100. So a difference of 10% of the benefit share at $100 will matter a lot, which is why we also need smarter contracts, in order to have farmers be able to get more of that upside. We are working now. Ministry of Agriculture has asked a few of us, 2, 3 of us, to actually help them do model contracts for farmers in India. So we've just submitted a draft there, and we are hoping that the ministry actually helps notify to buyers because right now the contracts are not designed to give that upside, but the percentage will matter from all of these perspectives. Yeah.
Right. Um, I think it's really interesting to see that project developers do want to give the maximum co-benefits. They want to have all these elements in their projects, but they also face the challenge from the larger market because that's what's more important. I mean, not more important, but that's what's something that defines the project. Moving on to Mr. Horo. So, development agencies like GIZ do play a very important role in in balancing the environment integrity at the same time the community benefits. So my question is, how is GIZ looking at um, the carbon markets? Could you please shed light on few of your projects in this domain?
Um, when I was registering myself, I was confused which tag to go on with. This is one is the wrong one, I would say. So GIZ is not a typical funding agency. We are a not-for-profit institution under the German ministry, right? And our role in any country, including in India, is to really pilot innovations which could be scaled by the partner systems here. So that's our role. So we, as you see, more of facilitator of ecosystems and partnerships, like with NABARD, with agriculture, with Ministry of Rural Development, to see how we can create these scalable solutions, right? So we had our own bits of experiences around carbon markets as well. And it's all started from the fact like this is a growing opportunity to tap into carbon markets as an additional incentives that we can provide to the farmers and the community to make this shift towards more sustainable ways of managing land and doing agriculture, right? And we have been working on various aspects of it, right? We saw carbon markets from the climate finance angle, first of all. Like while we are trying to explore how we can bring in more climate finance into more regenerative space, agroecological space, or nature-based solution space, where does carbon markets fit in? Second was also in terms of now we have projects which are also looking at really promoting this transformation from conventional agriculture to more agroecology. And then within that, we are saying, again, where do we bring in some additional incentives from the carbon markets? Some experiences from those. One, when we were working on land management improvement at the farmers levels, right? Improving more nature-based ways of managing land, soil health, agroecology. We realized there are a lot of these mitigation co-benefits that are being generated. You know, our focus was, of course, soil health, agroecology, but there were these co-benefits. So what we did was we brought in the project developers, carbon market players, and the implementing NGO partners on the same table. You discuss, you decide whether there is a viable carbon project that could be taken up ahead, right? With a very clear understanding that we have to maximize the benefits towards the farmers, right? Second was in terms of where do you see that farmers get a bit of a assurance of how much they can get as in return, right? That we have been talking about the floor price and all, right? So we're trying to really push for that. But as we have discussed, it's really market driven, so it's very difficult as of now. But we have to really then go with the heart, saying that okay, we'll maximize the benefits to the farmers. We also had was there was conflict of overlaps, right? One project developer say, hey, these are the farmers that I have been trying to develop a project on. The other project developer would work with the same community. We don't have a framework information system where there is a transparency that this is the kind of project with this set of farmers that we are working with. And these are the partners and these are the benefit sharing mechanisms. There is no transparency in terms of when we were trying to sort of assess the experiences around carbon markets, it is very difficult to get the data out. And we have been hearing about that, right? Can we be more transparent on that? Not in terms of what the actual price relation are, but in the terms of what is that price relation? Is it in the net price or in the gross price? We don't know yet. No? So this kind of transparency needs to happen. So our going forward role is we see that there is a lot of interest now from the investors to invest in the carbon projects in the agricultural space. But they need three things. One, can you give me the quality of carbon credits? Can you ensure that what you're saying is actually happening? And that needs a bit of low cost, efficient MRV systems, right? We cannot be more costly. Second is in terms of can you give us assurance that farmers will continue to do this practice, right? And that is where you need the implementing NGO partners to ensure that. Because agriculture is not like forestry that you plant a tree and then you leave the tree for 10, 25 years, right? Agriculture is a seasonal practice. Every season, the farmer has to do that practice. For example, alternate wetting and drying. This has to be done every season in rice, right? So that's a continuity that any investor or a carbon marketplace would want to have, and that is the role of implementing NGOs.
The third one that they always come in and ask is in terms of how will you share the benefits? For individual farmers, the benefits is really small, right? Now we are looking at the models. Can we aggregate the benefits at the community levels, at the levels of FPOs, cooperatives, so that it is some financial benefit
Recording in
policy.
progress.
What do you think Indian carbon markets should adopt, which can be different from voluntary markets or similar?
Thankfully, so what Swapna was also mentioning, India is setting up its own carbon credit trading schemes now, right? We have all started with first of all having a methodology on renewable energy, and now the second phase is now towards developing a methodology for sustainable agriculture. And Ministry of Agriculture, because we have been talking to both CCTS and also Ministry of Agriculture, and I think the intention there is really, really clear. We have to maximize the benefits to the farmers. That's the very intention of both CCTS and Ministry of Agriculture, right? So now they are working to develop a methodology for sustainable agriculture, and that is where a lot of this consultation has started to happen, just to see where are the learnings from. In the rat race, we had a lot of carbon projects. Now we have learnings out of it, both good and bad, as I said, right? Can we pick up the good learnings and create a solution for in the Indian context? Many of that will be also needing to be at the governance levels, right? For example, at least the modalities of engagement with the farming communities, that should be something which is governance led. There should be something on at least having some benchmarks on quality assurances of the carbon credits, or else anything. So what happens is, which because it's market driven, the moment Indian carbon projects start showing a dip in quality of carbon credits, the entire market will react and the value of carbon prices will drop. So as a country, we need to make sure that we have a benchmark on quality so that the value of carbon prices don't drop, at least from the Indian context. The third thing is in terms of these kind of platforms are really, really needed, right? Many a times, formal public forums cannot be organized. So these kind of forums where project developers, civil society, academics, bilaterals, and others should come together and see where are we going wrong, where are we going right, can we do more of what is right, right? And then all of us have influence and all of us have been taking part in a lot of these policy discourses, right? We all go there with our own interest areas, with our mandates. Can we go as collective mandates? That should be the role of these kind of platforms. I'll take a pause here, maybe. Yeah.
Thank you so much. My next question is to Mr. Ranjan. NABARD is one of the most important financial institutions when it comes to the rural economy and rural development. So, what role do you think NABARD has to play in generating credible carbon credits and also shaping up the carbon markets?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for recognizing the role of NABARD. Uh, the way I say it, NABARD can play a very critical role in developing this carbon market. And many of you know that NABARD has been in the field of development of nature-based solutions or nature-based schemes since last 30, 35, 40 years. And a lot of our partners are here also. We have developed more than 5,000 watershed projects. We have developed more than 1,000 orchard-based tribal development projects, covering close to 5.5 lakhs families and planting more than 5 crores of trees in close to 5 lakh acre land. We have also worked extensively on institutional development in terms of
farmer produce organizations, the cooperatives, the SSG movement. So, and somebody was saying in the morning that farmers are at the bottom of the carbon value chain. So it's a structural problem. It's not only about the carbon value chain. It's all the value chain where the farmer is involved. He is at the bottom of the value chain. And probably our effort is to work through these uh, the village institutions like FPOs, the cooperatives, to build more trust, build more transparency in the system. Anyway, coming back to the I think I'll speak about the fund. So having implemented all these projects, we realized that the nature-based schemes, it has huge upfront investment cost in terms of mobilization of the farmer, in terms of the capacity building, in terms of uh, developing a monitoring system. So we have developed this NABARD Carbon Fund, which is a very small fund to begin with, close to 300, 400 crores for this current year. But the idea is that it is not NCF. We want to we want our stakeholders, our partners, to look at it as a ecosystem developing instrument where it can help the developers to avail cost. I mean, I appreciate what he was saying, that it's an investment driven mandate, investor driven mandate. But when we can reduce the cost of the investment, when we can de-risk the investment, possibly we'll be able to pass on more benefit to the farmer. So NCF idea is to work towards that, and it has a huge grant component also. NCF, not only a debt component, it's a grant component also, which can be used for capacity building, for developing digital MRV solutions. And building on this, we are also in discussions with other MDBs, where we are trying to develop some kind of guarantee or some kind of de-risking mechanism, so that we ultimately NABARD's job. I mean, we have a 10 lakh crore organization, but we cannot reach all the farmers. So ultimately, our mandate is to place it before other financial institutions as a bankable model. So going forward, our idea is to de-risk it, to develop a risk framework model and show it to the banks that it is doable, it is beneficial for you, it is a business product. Unless and until it becomes a business product, I think when the investment comes from the buyer side or the foreign equity side, the developer's equity will be limited. So unless and until we increase the equity of the developers, he will not be able to share more money with the ultimate beneficiaries.
Very important point. De-risking. If we can de-risk, we can pass on more benefits to the communities and build better projects. Um, I think this is one open question, last question from my side to all of you. One key reform that you believe is essential to drive this change towards value in the coming decade. Mr. Ranjan, if you'd want to.
I think hard to pinpoint one key reform, but I say the biggest opportunity is in the India CCTS, because we are in a position now to shape a whole market, and we have a lot of lessons which we didn't have many years ago. So we are in a position to imbibe in the CCTS principles of equity, of benefit sharing, of floor prices. We are in a position to do real price discovery. What is the cost of carbon for industry? Right now this is just based on demand supply, but if we can put in the principles of right price discovery, floor prices, benefit sharing, create a technology backbone which is supported by the government to allow project developers to access data at low cost, I think we'll go a long way in not only unlocking great value for Indian farmers, but create a template for the whole world.
Three quick things that I would really want to see as change and evolution. One is in terms of can we look at from the farmer's perspective and see how we can maximize from all of these ecosystem benefits? Carbon credit being one of them, green credits being other, gender credits being other. So let's look at from that aspect. So I would see from that angle, right? Second is in terms of, and this is something which has been proven historically also. The biggest program like MG Narega set up a social audit system, which was the best monitoring system ever. Can we look at those processes built in the carbon markets? The third would be in terms of we also need to create some governance systems to create some transparency here in the carbon markets, right? And that I think again what Swapna was saying, CCTS does offer that opportunity now. So as a stakeholders, as all of us, we should really help in terms of creating these governance systems there. So yeah, three things.
Uh, Definitely, I think what Sopan has mentioned, I can't agree more. It's a it's a idealistic thing that having all those reforms in the policy, but again, bit of a pessimistic. You can say the thought process that what are the when we are expecting the reforms, it should not be very ambitious because it's a bureaucratic process which needs to be taken into consideration. So for my side, farmer benefit sharing 10%, 90% stake still not make any difference whether keeping a reform. The tangible thing which we can expect as a reform is disclosing the price. If we are disclosing the price, sharing only 1% to the farmer is a good direction, first step that bring the transparency into the system, that how 80%, 70% it's going to look like, to whom we are selling at what price. We can easily sell at short and say we are giving 90%, but and then the other trader agency is actually creating the value. So disclosing of the price is very simple, tangible action point. As a policy reform, we can expect that the moment we are doing any transaction, retiring, trading, you have to disclose the price as a mandatory aspect. Second is pricing the co-benefits. Woman, gender, biodiversity, good to have silver lining, but it doesn't command mandatory premium into the project. It's really perceived the marketing capacity of a project developer and the paying capacity of the buyer. But the moment we are pricing it, that it is added certain SDGs, whichever agency has issuing it, it has a additional value which needs to be given. So these are the two reform I can expect, that at a bare minimum, disclosing of the pricings at any transactions and pricing the co-benefits.
Thank you. I'll add to that whatever they have said. From my side, one key reform will be creation of long-term demand signals from the buyer side. We know that the pricing is very uncertain, uh, often dependent upon the spot market transactions, which somehow force the developers to focus more on the volume uh, rather than the value. So, if we develop a long-term demand signal, possibly that will help the developers uh, to design a project in a manner which is a kind of win-win situation for all of us. When we have a long-term price visibility and certainty, and NABARD has entered into an MOU with FAO, and we are focusing on the domestic buyers, and we are in discussion with them. We will be holding. It was supposed to be on 17th, but we have postponed it. We are going to have a detailed workshop with the domestic buyers to create a demand signal domestically. Basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to questions.
I'll request you to take it during the lunch, personally. Thank you. We are running out of time. That's why.
All right. Would like to thank all the panelists, and clearly there's an intention to develop good projects. There are certain challenges that we're all trying to address, and this needs to be a more collaborative effort and responsibilities shared amongst all the stakeholders. On that note, I think we'd like to conclude the session.
Thank you very much, all the panelists, for the enriching discussion. I request I'll request the panel to be remain on the stage for a bit longer. I'll request Dr. Professor Pavisetti to please come on the stage and request him to felicitate the panel. So please. Miss Sonia. Uh, Thank you. May I request Mr. Jasmeet Singh? Mr. Sopan Mehra. Mr. Naveen Horo. Mr. Mrinal Ranjan, sir. May I request all the panel members to have a group photo? Thank you very much. Now, since we are running little late on time, we'll break for the lunch here, and you can catch the panelists during the lunch, have networking session, and then ask your questions there. But before yeah, yeah. So I'll announce it. Before we go on the lunch, I'll request everyone to reconvene in the hall sharply at 1:30. We have a keynote address by Shri Praveen Pradesi, CEO of Maharashtra Institution for Transformation. So we don't want you to miss any of that. So please reconvene here at 1:30. I'll also have a small announcement. We have a gallery in the lunch area. We also have a VR headsets in the front. You can
see some videos on microforest and agriculture and other activities on that. And then we'll break for the lunch here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, sorry to kind of break this amazing conversations that are happening in the room, but just a gentle request if we all could start proceeding towards lunch so that we can begin the next session sharp at 1:30. We are running a little bit behind schedule and we would love to make up for time. Thank you. Yeah. So 1:30 we have a keynote address by Mr. Praveen Pardeshi. So we would not want to get late for that. Thank you.
वो टाइमर भी सेट करना है सामने की टीवी में लगता है ना।
वो नहीं हो पाएगा सर।
अरे होता है यार, बात हुई है।
इस वाली टीवी पे
हाँ, सामने वाली टीवी में।
देखता हूँ मैं। टाइमर आपके
वो बस कनेक्ट कर दो, बाकी तो देख लेंगे। अच्छा, अंदर कितने माइक? ये थोड़ा देख लेता हूँ मैं आपको। भाई अंदर माइक कितने हैं?
दो है।
दो कॉर्डलेस है।
हाँ।
और यहाँ पे कितने?
दो।
ना खुलता है ये।
फिर आपको ना ये चीज यहाँ रखनी पड़ेगी।
ठीक है, चलेगा।
ठीक है, या तो यहाँ पे लो आप। ठीक है, ये सही है।
चलेगा।
ठीक है, ये इतना पूरा खुल जाएगा।
तो ये ऐसे ही रहेगा।
ये तो ऐसे ही रहेगा। इसको कौन सा हटाना पड़ेगा? वही तो आपसे मना कर रहा था मैं।
नहीं मतलब
आपको अगर इतना बंद कर सकते हो बस, इससे ज्यादा क्योंकि ये तो खुलेगा ना इसमें लगाने
मुझे लगा नीचे आता है ये।
क्या चीज।
डालिया? तो वो काउंट ठीक है ना? अभी भी भीड़ है।
થોડું announcement કરો ને, let's settle down એવું type.
Welcome back, everyone. May I request everyone to please settle down? We'll start our next session very soon. I hope you all had a very wonderful lunch. We'll start off with our next agenda. We now have a keynote address by Shri Praveen Pardesi, CEO of the Maharashtra Institution for Transformation. Like to invite Shri Praveen Pardesi on the stage, please. Mr. Pardesi is the CEO of Maharashtra Institution for Transformation and a leader in governance and public policy to deliver the keynote address. Thank you, sir.
Speak straight away.
Sure. Over to you.
The presentation.
May we have the presentation, please?
First, let me thank the Conclave on India's carbon economy and creating this platform, the Bharat Carbon platform, because we don't really have a market as yet for carbon except for leveraging the international. So this is a very good starting point. I was discussing with the organizers how should we sort of talk about the carbon economy, and I thought that what we can do is to sort of open up three questions. One is that whatever initiatives the governments do, how does the government leverage both the voluntary or the compliance carbon markets? Because I don't see any government, especially not the state government, despite having created huge carbon mitigation initiatives, that they have been able to leverage this for themselves. So that's a big question, and we can just open it up for a few questions, because I understand there are all private practitioners who are interested in carbon market, and also NGOs who can facilitate this transition. So can we have the presentation? So how does it move forward? Yeah. So basically, Maharashtra, like all other states, I want to place this whole carbon economy in terms of aspirations, aspirations for Viksit Bharat, Viksit Maharashtra. We are trying to reach $1 trillion by the 28, 29, and we are already 0.6 trillion. We are the closest to that. Sorry. So achieving these goals are important in themselves. For example, the 1 trillion for poverty alleviation, expansion of the infrastructure. The advantage we have is we don't have a locked-in carbon infrastructure where we have to retrofit or change or abandon, assets, which is the problem even in Netherlands and other places where they are moving from their existing grid to solar. This is an opportunity to build sustainably a low infrastructure base. So that is what. And then how do we go for this? So I was going to talk about five major shifts that we are trying to do in Maharashtra, and I'll talk about three, but also talk about how we can leverage these initiatives to create a vibrant carbon market for that. So my first shift is the shift in urban transport. You know, all the congestion in the cities. It's nothing to do with absence of roads, absence of road widening, absence of flyovers. It's nothing to do with any of these things. It's simply to do with what is the percentage of people which travel on private cars versus those in public transport. You can build as many roads, you can make the whole of Delhi a road, yet it will be congested. So public transport is the only answer, and that is the first thing. I'll talk about. I have not talked about the second and third, then the transition to solar energy and what it entails. So Maharashtra has an energy demand which is as big as any country. It's almost as big as UK. So this is what is being planned. Actually, we came to the transition to solar energy